Since the beginning of the show, Miraculous Ladybug is proven and once again shown to be the best show in the kids creator content ever. And as time goes on, more new episodes and more new seasons are coming up very soon, and throughout the whole years has evolved into a much more kid content, more friendly channel. From its YouTube channel to Instagram to Twitter to Discord, anybody can obviously be a fan of the show. So let's break down the top 10 best episodes of Miraculous Ladybug ever of all time. Number 10, Prime Queen. Yes, this is kind of a nice episode that pretty much shows how well and thought out some of the writers can be in this episode. But if you haven't seen it, I'll tell you. In this episode, Marinette is babysitting Manon, and Alia comes to visit whenever she calls her, of course. But right away on the news anchor, she's going to be featured on the news, but obviously she doesn't feel like she wants to be on it because she's not a superstar. She's a superhero, obviously. But when they announced that it would be tonight, she can't be free. She won't be able to go tonight because obviously she has to babysit Manon. So she calls up Alia to help her come and assist her, just only so she can leave and just go to the news anchor herself in person as Ladybug. And obviously, it's a pretty nice episode. You can see how sometimes Marinette can, I guess, use Alia as an excuse so she can do things that she needs to do behind her back, I guess, since she doesn't know that she's Ladybug in this episode at all. Because, again, she doesn't reveal it until season 4, which you guys need to check that episode out. But anyways, onto the episode. So far, here is where it gets pretty interesting, and the content is pretty funny. We can see that at first, Ladybug and Cat Noir obviously don't want to answer any fan questions about themselves or if they're dating or anything. It's pretty funny to me, even when the pictures are being shown out of content, because right away she just points that out, and it's pretty funny to see their reactions to it. And obviously, it does not show that they're both in love. It just means that they were fighting supervillains, obviously. But since some people take that out of content, they just think right away they're just doing something else. So during this whole episode, the TV news reporter gets akumatized and right away turns into Prime Queen. And of course, she takes the opportunity to do the show once again, but in her own way, all akumatized, and obviously try to get more information out of Ladybug and Cat Noir. Well, at first they both seemed a bit hesitant at first. They obviously had no choice but to accept this whole so-called interview. And what here is where things get pretty funny. You can see how she just abducts Chloe out of nowhere. I think it's pretty funny. And she would just use her as bait to just drag Ladybug and Cat Noir into her trap, obviously, which is pretty clever, but at the same time, it was pretty funny. And what was more funny is the way Ladybug would just straight up just lie in front of Prime Queen, just grab Cat Noir's hand and just say, like, she would admit it, that they're both in love, but obviously it's not true, because we know it's just a trick. But obviously what was the most funniest part about this whole episode was the way while the train was slowing down, when she slowed it down, you could see that both Ladybug and Cat Noir were both falling on the side of the train. And at that time, Cat Noir was purring, like, really loudly. You could obviously hear that. And the expression on Ladybug's face was pretty funny. And she asked him, did I just hear you purr? And of course he was like, no way, but we obviously could tell that she heard that completely. And of course, out of nowhere, she would take a picture of both of them holding hands right away, which is pretty funny. But what was more suspenseful about this episode was how she's like, you two need to remove your mask and reveal your secret identities, aka give her your miraculous, which obviously isn't new to us. Number 9, Sandboy. Okay, well, I'm gonna shock a lot of people when I say this. I really don't think this is a bad of an episode. Okay, I get some people would say it's probably the boringest episode, but I could see why. But even though at the same time I could see why it was entertaining and it was pretty funny at the same time, because obviously the whole content of this episode was about nightmares, about people's nightmares and their dreams so far, which honestly I could relate sometimes because we all had bad nightmares at one time, or we've had some good ones too. But obviously we would never expect Marinette, Adrien, Ladybug, and Cat Noir to have kind of the similar dreams and nightmares they have, but it was pretty funny. Overall, this episode, I would watch it if I were you and give it a 10 out of 10, obviously, because this episode is pretty good, pretty entertaining. The jokes are so funny, obviously. And the way that Hawkmoth tried to get signs of Ladybug and Cat Noir out there, they obviously couldn't. And a little fact, we finally get to see where the Kwamis all live under the Miracle Box, which is pretty interesting. So far, this episode is a 9 out of 10. Number 8, Frightening Gale. Yeah, this episode was pretty entertaining, but it was pretty nice to see a new character, I guess, appear on TV as one of those who would want to make a music video out of Ladybug and Cat Noir, and someone that Marinette would look up to sometimes. It's pretty nice. I feel like she would obviously have a huge connection between her and that person too, but not like romantically, just as best friends. In this episode, Marinette notices that this lady is going to be doing a music video about Ladybug and Cat Noir, but she needs to find her Ladybug and her Cat Noir, and obviously they pick Adrien. I mean, who obviously they wouldn't pick anybody else other than the handsome boy on the magazines, of course. So obviously they picked Adrien to be Cat Noir. Adrien obviously was a bit freaked out at first, and he was pretty concerned because he didn't want to reveal his secret identity at all, obviously, to everyone, because everybody would realize he's the real Cat Noir. And same goes with Marinette. She doesn't want to reveal her secret identity, so she obviously just wants to right away make sure that nobody could recognize her, because obviously she and Ladybug look like the same person, except their clothing, obviously. But their hairstyles are the same. They're exactly the same thing. So if you guys don't notice that, go compare their pictures. So while all of that is going on, they're doing the audition. Obviously, Chloe wants to audition for the role of Ladybug, which I'm not surprised, of course. I mean, at first, maybe some of you were surprised, but I was kind of a little surprised. I was like, what? There's no way she would want to do this, because in later seasons, it didn't seem like she would cosplay as her anymore. Obviously, because she started hating her for a reason. So overall, this episode is a good way to see how people can right away manipulate your emotions about and give you no permission to do anything at a place, which is pretty much, I would say, bullshit, but at the same time it makes sense. But overall, I would recommend watching this episode if you haven't gotten the chance to see it, and go check it out, and you guys can see why this is only at number 8. Number 7, Zombie Zoo. Yeah, this episode isn't that bad. It's not horrible or awful. It has a nice message in this episode, which we can all relate to right away. Or some of us could, some of us wouldn't. But so far, this episode is just about Chloe being an asshole in this episode, and obviously blaming it, right? Not blaming it, but doing something terrible on Marinette's gift for her teacher, Miss Bustier, obviously, which obviously everybody likes Miss Bustier. I think we all like her, obviously, as a teacher for everybody, as a look up to everyone, of course. And we can see why in this episode she doesn't deserve what she got, because she got akumatized, and honestly, we kind of feel bad for her in this episode, but at least she's saved at the end. So overall, this episode is pretty nice. It has a good message, and I would highly go see it. Number 6, Despair Bear. Yeah, some of you guys would probably want this episode on number 3 or 5 or 4, but I only put this at number number 7 because it has a nice meaning to it, and it shows a bit of a different personality in Chloe, of course. So in this episode, Chloe, of course, always goes about her ways and tries to blame Marinette for a lot of things, especially for her pulling the fire trigger, of course. So right away, she immediately blames them for that, and then of course, everybody gets, I guess, a punishment for it, except for Chloe, of course, because she, I guess, doesn't deserve it. But of course, everybody is just miserable with her and mad at her, especially Adrien. And Adrien tries to go talk to her, but of course she's happy to see him. And of course that makes Marinette super mad, of course, because she can't stand her with him, of course, as you guys have seen in previous episodes back in season 1 and 2. But overall, this episode is kind of funny. I would say it's pretty funny, and it has, I guess, a nice message into this episode. But overall, it's a 7 out of 10. It's not horrible. It's not bad. It's just, it has a kind of okay, good message to impress. But the second message is not to just don't do anything or do something just to impress the other person, just to get you to like them or something. I honestly liked it a bit this episode. Number 5, Princess Fragrance. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with this episode. But some of you guys always complain about this episode, which I honestly don't understand why, but I can kind of see why you guys kind of hate it, or some of you guys don't. But overall, this episode's pretty nice. It is pretty okay to me, and the message of it is fine, but other than that, it's kind of alright. But it can be a bit risky sometimes with this episode. Number 4, Godzilla. Okay, some people might complain this is kind of a boring episode, and I can understand why. But this episode pretty much it can prove to you how kind some people can be, even though looks can be deceiving. But overall, this episode's pretty funny, pretty entertaining, pretty actiony, as I would say, because there's a lot more action into this episode than just like the other episodes. But overall, this one takes the cake. Number 3, Determination. This episode kind of brings back a bit from Puppeteer, of course, because right away, this episode brings lots of deja vu in some people. But in this episode, Adrien wants to hang out with Marinette out of nowhere, of course, which I guess it's not a lie. Not gonna lie, I was not expecting that. But of course, he brings along Kagami, and Marinette doesn't really want to be alone with him. So obviously, she brings along Luca as well. So of course, all 4 of them go to the museum, the Wax Museum, of course, which occurred in episode of Puppeteer 2, which all of you can go see that episode, by the way. And of course, they remembered Adrien's statue. And right away, Adrien reminds Marinette and remembers her about what she did, what happened in the past, and how she legit kissed him. But of course, she doesn't want to remember what exactly happened in that episode, which overall I would say is pretty funny and kind of nice jokes in touch of it. And of course, we get to see some more action in it as usual, but there's more suspension in this episode than ever. So overall, of course, we are both seeing both characters falling in love with each other, of course. But overall, this episode is pretty nice. Number 2, Confrontation. This is going to be the third best, episode I've ever seen, because in this episode, Marinette literally exposes Lila. And this is the best episode I have ever seen, because I've been dying for her to really expose her to everybody who knows her. And of course, she does that. And I'm so happy of Marinette to do that for her and to protect everybody from her lies, of course. And of course, a happy ending at the end of the title card. But of course, she always comes back, I guess. And of course, Chloe is going to help her in that episode. But yeah, other than that, this episode is a badass good episode, and I would recommend you guys watch it if you don't know what I'm talking about. Now, before I reveal number 1, here are some honorable mentions. Optigami. It's a pretty nice, touchy episode, but at the same time, it can be a little challenging to understand this whole episode because it has a lot to do with planning, timing, and difficulties. Gang of Secrets. This is kind of one of the saddest episodes, but I decided not to put it on the list because at the end we have a shocking ending. Of course, because we didn't see none of this coming. Guilt Trip. Well, this one wasn't really that bad. I just didn't want to consider it as the best one because at the same time it would be terrible, I guess, but you guys have your own choice about this episode. Senti Bubbler. Well, there's a bit of confusion between this episode because of how looks can be super deceiving and very confusing sometimes. Wishmaker. Yeah, that episode kind of was a little okay, I would say, but it wasn't that bad. It would just be like, what's going on? What's happening? All that kind of questions. Simple Men. Well, this episode I wasn't going to consider to be the best episode. I was going to consider that one to be the worst episode of the show, and I was going to mention that in my honorable mentions list right there on the worst one, but of course, I completely forgot about that episode. Gabriel Agreste. This episode kind of revolves around Gabriel, of course, but I wouldn't consider this one the best one because it just doesn't have so much action into it as some of the others. But other than that, let's reveal the number 1 best episode of Miraculous Ladybug ever. Number 1, Recreation. So many of you guys have been recommending this episode for a long time to be the best one of all because we finally get to see Adrianette together for the first time. But of course we obviously get to see them in the next episode after confrontation. But in this episode, obviously, after the wish that Gabriel made, the whole world was recreated again into a peaceful, happy world. And at the end, also, Marinette is able to get all of the Miraculous back, except, of course, for the Butterfly Miraculous, which we all know what happens with that. And of course, she brings back all the heroes and all the holders of the latest Miraculous holders. And of course, she decides to give them permanently to all of the holders of the Miraculouses. And of course, we get a nice happy ending, but then we get another ending, of course, which leaves us all in confusion and, of course, in suspense, of course. So this episode pretty much is the best one I would consider because we get to finally see Adrianette together and we get an Adrianette kiss, of course. Everybody's been dying for that episode. Everybody's been dying to see them together. Of course, we didn't really want a statue of Gabriel, of course, because he obviously was portrayed, of course, as the bad guy. But, of course, we got to see everybody happy, Natalie back, and Amelie in Paris now, not Emily. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this countdown, and of course, I hope you leave your thoughts about this list below, and I will be reading all the comments if you guys leave it, of course, and I will see you in my next video. Peace. Hey guys, it's Litzy, and of course, you guys been dying for this video because I left out a little comment right there on my channel on community page. You guys can go check it out. I wanted to make the best list ever for Miraculous Ladybug, and of course you guys have been asking for it, and here it is.